Ikhwan, salamun lil jamia. I'm going to be explaining some things about the Trinity and about the person of Christ. So I think a lot of you guys will probably find this pretty interesting. Doesn't the Trinity violate Leibniz law? And for those of you guys who are not aware, Leibniz law states that if A and B are identical, then whatever is true of A is true of B as well. So honestly, the confusion seems to revolve around the word God being used in more than one way. The objection really seems to work only if, for instance, when we say Jesus is God and the Father is God, if those are taken as identity statements, because then you could say, well, if Jesus is God and the Father is God, then Jesus must be the Father. So we're not modalists. That doesn't work for us. The objection really only works if the word God is being used as a proper name for one hypostasis. And then at some point, it's also being applied to the Son. That's modalism. We believe that there's a real distinction. Within Eastern Orthodoxy, we believe there's a real distinction between essence and hypostasis. So then you kind of have to ask yourself the question, okay, well, is Jesus God by predication or is he God by identity? With this one, make sure that you avoid the category error between nature and person, nature and hypostasis, because what's going to happen is if by identity you mean that he is numerically identical to the hypostasis of the Father, to the person of the Father, then no. But if by identity you mean that he has the same essence as the Father, then yes. So this is typically why we say that Jesus is God by predication according to the essence, because he shares that same essence. He's consubstantial with the Father according to the essence. So now, now I'm confused. Like sometimes I get confused when I'm listening to you. It sounds like you're saying 3, but then it sounds like you're saying 1. So how do you count the Trinity? Do you say 3 or do you say 1? St. John of Damascus says something really interesting actually about counting and how we understand distinction when it refers to the Trinity. He says, number belongs to things which differ, and that it's impossible for things to be numbered which do not differ at all. Hence, things which differ have number, and it is according to the manner in which they differ that they are numbered. So the differ here is just going to be a distinction between nature and person. It's a real distinction, and we understand that distinction does not entail composition. For this reason, we count according to the distinction being considered. This is also somewhat known as the relative identity operator. So instead of saying this way or that way, which is a false dichotomy, which is a fallacy, we say it's both and. So by nature, we say 1 according to identity because there's only one referent, that is the divine nature. But when referring to the persons, the hypostases, we count 3, which is also called counting by division. This actually is pretty intuitive. We do it, we just don't realize we're doing it. In everything, we count by the distinction that is to be considered. I'll give you 2 examples. In a particular situation, you will be forced to count by division. Let's say you have a bag of sand in your basement. You move the bag of sand from one area of your basement to another area. Unbeknownst to you, there's a small tear in this bag of sand, and you lose 2 grains of sand from moving it. If you're only going to count by identity, that is identifying that bag with that particular item as it being a bag of sand, then when you move it from one area to the other and it loses 2 small grains, you can no longer identify that particular as a bag of sand. So in that particular situation, you'll be forced to count by division, understanding the distinctions that are at play. It's just ridiculous to say, oh, well, you lose 2 small grains of sand, now it is no longer a bag of sand. That's ridiculous. So in that particular instance, you're going to be counting by division. But when it comes to things like the laws of logic, you can't have a distinction in the law of logic. You understand? You can't, that's not something you can quote unquote cut in half. The law of logic is the law of logic. So there are no distinctions really in that you can really use as you would with the bag of sand analogy. You understand? So for things like that, you're going to be counting by identity. But for other things like counting the ocean or counting water in the ocean, like if you take a cup and you put it in the ocean, you take it out, well, now do you have two oceans? No, that's just ridiculous. In that particular example where we're counting, you're going to be using division for that. But in other instances, you're going to be using identity. And what we're saying is with God, because he is not a quote unquote particular, he's not a universal, he grounds universals, we're going to be using both and, otherwise known as the relative identity operator. So for us, this isn't really a problem. We would just say that it's intuitive, because you don't count everything the exact same way. You count according, again, to the distinction that is to be considered. So to wrap this up, St. John of Damascus says something else that I think is really interesting. He says, so when we contemplate the Godhead, the motion and will of the Godhead, and the identity of substance, virtue, operation, and dominion, then that which appears to us is one. But when we contemplate the persons, that is the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, then we adore three. So that's that. If you haven't already, check out this lecture series that I have done. We have lectured through St. John of Damascus on the Orthodox Faith, Book 1 in full. And I think that you'd really enjoy it if you liked this video. Other than that, I will see you guys later. Salam wa na'ama ya akhwan.